During our last talk, we spoke about Mira's childhood and mentioned about her mother, her father, and other incidental relationships. Mother makes a pointed observation that her mother, Matilde, had great aspiration in her being. She always had a sense of progress, never satisfied with anything achieved. And it was for that reason that she took birth in her. She was a woman of great common sense, practical sense rather, who had no room for sentiment, and she wanted her children, two children, the first one having died due to some wrong injection, vaccine or something like that, her two children to be the best in the world. Whenever she found her child girl not mixing with other girls, other children, always retiring to her room, she would be perplexed. And Mira had learnt, even at that age of 4 or 5, not to confide in her mother about what she was thinking, what she was feeling. And seeing her always shut up in herself, without any articulate feelings, Matilde once told her that you are a monster. She also said that why are you sitting like this, as if the whole world is pressing upon you? She said, it does. Her mother did not know what to make out of it. She just went out of the room. If this was the relation of want of proper understanding between the mother and the child, girl, she was very fond of her son, Matthew, and she always called him my God. But he had a very awful temper. He would fly into anger at the slightest pretext. And many were the occasions when he had hit Mira, his little sister. But they had a very intimate relation, brother and sister. And once, when she found that her brother had answered back his father, who was a great man of strong will, he said something and the boy answered him back. And he, being an old-style father, naturally spanked him hard. Mira watched him and she said, if you do that again, I will leave the house. The father, Maurice, was flabbergasted to see the authority with which the girl was telling him. And thereafter, he never repeated what he had done. This boy was Matteo, very studious, not though scholarly, disciplined, and mother recalled how when he was about 17 years old, he was crossing over the river Seine on a bridge. It was evening. Suddenly, he felt a kind of descent in him. And the descent was so powerful that he just stood immobilized. He couldn't move from his place. And he heard a voice, not exactly a voice, but he heard it. If you want, you can become a god. Instinctively, the boy answered, "No, I want to serve humanity." Naturally, he didn't speak of this incident to his mother, but he told his sister. And she told him that he was a fool. And she always felt that for him, serving humanity was God. That is why even in his official career, he chose to serve in the African colonies, where he rose to be the Governor General. And he always paid attention to the uplifting of the conditions of the blacks, serving them. During his later years, he was in the colonial office, and he had occasion to help the ashram. Once was before the ashram was formed, when after the First World War broke out, the British government in India put pressure on the French to deport Sri Aurobindo and his colleagues somewhere else, either send them back to India or remove them from Pondicherry. And the French government here could not resist the pressure. And the papers had to be routed through the colonial office. And Sri Aurobindo observes that when he was informed, he just sat tight on the papers and they never saw the light of the day. And the whole program was shelved. Much later, after the ashram came into existence, somewhere in the 30s, there was some mischief from the town. They had made petitions to the local government asking that the ashram may be subjected to scrutiny and some kind of search conducted. It was at that time that mother's brother was informed, and he saw to it that the report made was favorable instead of being unfavorable, and the next governor was very favorable to the ashram. So there were the two occasions when he helped. But mother says he never understood what was this teaching, what was this ashram for. He was a friend of Jules Rimet, the famous writer, and he wanted to come to India and meet Sri Aurobindo and the mother. But that never came to be. That was her brother. Her father, I mentioned earlier that he was a Turk banker. He was Morris. And mother remembers that he was a man of wonderful health and an unusual stability about him. She mentions this, as one of the causes for her taking birth in the family. A strong physique with full control, and he could control wild horses, even a horse, by just using his legs. His physical poise was extraordinary. He had a peculiar sight, he was very fond of birds, and it seems, in spite of his wife being so meticulous, disciplined, he had a number of birds in one room, and his windows are always shut. So when the doors were shut, he would just open the cage, and all the birds, canaries, they would fly, jump, and have a good time. Fond of animals, he would want to take the children to the circus, which I mentioned earlier, but mother had no special interest, though she would go to please him. This as far as the family was concerned. I have not thought it necessary to speak about her grandmother, who was a kind of an institution by herself. And was always concerned about the way her sons were spending her money. She was so much attached to the wealth and things that she left behind that after she died, her daughter, that is Mira's mother, complained that she has not gone. She is always here. And she would tell her, take care of this, take care of that, take care of this money. Of course, the things didn't last very long, but mother notes that her materialist mother had to take cognizance of the subtle presence of the grandmother after she died. Well, this was the background. And I mentioned that she became aware of a light and force at the age of 5 or thereabouts. She can't say exactly when her sadhana started. She didn't know it was sadhana, but she says there were some stirrings in her being. And about this light, which was at the same time a force, she had a notation in her awareness. Mother always spoke of her awareness. At that time, she did not know the word consciousness. But that light had a notation in awareness. She repeatedly recalled. And she felt that was going to do great things. What were the great things she did not know? But she was always feeling hurt by the way people behaved. The meannesses, the smallnesses, the falsehoods, the pettiness that were being displayed for no reason, even amongst her own relations. So she would try to understand. She wouldn't judge them, she wouldn't condemn them, but why? Why do they behave like this? And it was such a pursuit of inquiring, wanting to understand and know. It was in such a pursuit that she would sit in her room and think. So this habit of wanting to enter and know was with her all her life. She speaks how? In the world, whether we are aware of it or not, there is always a sea of vibrations, impacts from all over. And we just bump into them. So she says, and we don't attach any importance, we don't pay second thought. But she was led to enter into these things and try to understand. She complained here at the playground to the children here that when I was so small I would always want to understand, want to know. But you don't seem to have the least need for understanding. You want always to be told by people, by somebody, what is to be done. Have you ever made any effort to understand why things are what they are? And she used to recall these such incidents. At the age. And during these periods, she would feel like laughing. Laughter was always an inevitable companion with mother. I was mentioning to somebody this morning that before I came here, I had always understood that laughter was a taboo in spiritual life, which I wanted to live even from my boyhood. So I had an unconscious preference for seriousness and a certain aversion for laughter and those who were too articulate in their laughter. It was only after I came here and I saw mother that formation broke. And I was convinced without anybody telling me that laughter is a necessary part of spiritual life. It lightens the burden. It pricks our self-importance to be able to laugh at things, to be able to laugh at oneself, to be able to laugh at the frailties and defects in people around without trying to sit on judgment on them. So laughter was there with mother, capacity to laugh. Laughing at what? She makes a very serious observation. As if she says, laughing at something that pretends to be but is not. Because even at that age, she could see things are not what they are, what they look like. So she always had a smile when anything pretended to be what it is not. There is mention in her reminiscence once that when she was small, somebody said, there is no matter. He said, you see, this is a table, you think it is solid matter. But as a matter of fact, there are only vibrations. And there is no solid matter. She says that came as a shock to her. And it brought about a kind of revolution in her mind, brain. And things have never been the same thereafter. Always she would probe behind the surface, behind the exterior. Things are not what they seem to be. So it was in that light that she said, the illusionists are right. Shankara people philosophers and those who follow and speak in his accents that the world is not true, the world is unreal. She said, yes, what they say is true. Because what we think to be the world, it is not. The surface appearances are not real. Behind is something else which is true. So, the world is not real in the sense that the appearances are not true. Appearances are not real. This was her perception from her very childhood. And she says that this kind of bewilderment at everything turning to be not what it seems, inexplicable behavior, people, and nobody to explain, that bewilderment continued till she was 20. Because thereafter, a number of other changes took place. New factors came into operation. She met new personalities in the physical world and in the subtle. We will come to that later on. Till then, she says, it was a world of bewilderment. Another point to be noted was that she was of a stubborn nature. If she says, I won't do, she wouldn't do. That is how she did not read. She did not know how to read and write till she was 7. Her mother naturally tried her best to make her do that, but she was obstinate. So then one day what happened, that her brother, who was attending school, so he brought back, when he came, those big picture books, figures, illustrations, with the writings below. So she was interested in the pictures, this girl of 7, and she asked her brother, what does it say? He said, you read. But she said, I do not know how to read. You tell me how to read. Then he said, yes. And he brought her those books on which you learn to write the alphabets and things. And mother says that in 2 days she learnt writing, and by the 3rd day she knew reading. She started. And everyone was astounded that this girl, who was considered to be a retarded girl because she wouldn't read or write, she could do that in 3 days. And mother recalls that I knew within 8 days what would have taken years for me. That was her speed. At the age of 8, she started playing tennis, a game which she was very fond of and which she resumed playing here when the tennis courts were ready, after the starting of the school and the coming of children. And when she played, she notes that she always played with those who were experts. She says she never won, but she learned much. The adults, the players who knew, they were first intrigued why this girl wanted to play with them. But when they found out her intense desire to learn, they played their part. And that is why, whenever any competitions and things took place here, she never understood. She said, I don't understand Why you want to come first and second? Learn the game, learn the techniques. What to come high, to get rank is not important. I mentioned that somewhere in the 40s. I wanted to get to the exact date, that exact year, but I forgot. She started playing tennis. Till then, she was always having the western gown or the Indian sari. But when she started going to the tennis court to play tennis, she started having the other dress. How do they call it? Salwar kameez and that kitty cap. She would go exactly at 4. Many times I would stand here outside the door and she would go in the Humber car, Pavitra driving. And there would be usually Pranab there. But she would call other people to play with her. And it was an experience. People who played with her say it was not just a game. When she chose anybody, you come. Maybe singles, it may be doubles. People who had a great control and all that, their ball would go and hit mother on her body. And it was found that those who were in a wrong mood, maybe depression, maybe some kind of ill will, whatever it is, when they hit the ball, it would go and hit mother. And to help them, mother knew very well, to help them she would call those particular people and play with them. She enjoyed playing tennis. A lot of people used to gather. And Nirodha has described his sessions with the mother, playing tennis and taking part in tournaments. When he would tell Sri Aurobindo that at a particular time he had his match, and he says humorously, mother had marked out some other persons to win the match, but he would tell Sri Aurobindo and go. And when he came back, Sri Aurobindo would ask what happened. So these things Nirodha has recorded, I think either in his 12 years with Sri Aurobindo, I think so, in that book. Perhaps you may read that. It was not just a game. For her it was a recreation, but she utilized the occasion to reach spiritual message and spiritual help to those who played with her. To those who were very confident that they would be called and they would wait, she would not look at them. And they would develop complexes that mother is ignoring us. And when they gave up expecting, she would call them. She had her way techniques of pricking the ego bubble of players, ashram sadhaks, and she would stop after half an hour of playing. Then she would come to the playground, then have a small drink, cold drink, and then start interviews at 5. That's another matter. But I was mentioning how she started playing tennis at 8. She had a particular fondness for that game. And I believe she played till 1958, till she was 80. And that was the year when she stopped going practically to the playground, coming for blessings downstairs and things like that. She played. Before she went to the tennis court, she used to play ping pong you call it table tennis. It was being played in the Nangtai house opposite the playground. There was a long table. She would play there. There would be people like Purani and a few adults and then boys who would play with her. At that time tennis had not started, so table tennis was the fashion. Even in my opposite house there used to be a table when number of girls were playing. You are there, isn't it? You are playing or you are going there? Yes. So mother had, even before actual physical culture activities started in earnest, she had interest in these games and she put them to certain capital use for yogic purposes. Thereafter, there are more interesting incidents, educative, which we shall touch in the next session.
Yes, sir.